Hello and welcome everyone, Lart here, and today I'm taking a look at the 4K gaming monster that is the MSI AEGIS Ti3. For those of you who've been watching my reviews for a while now, you might remember that I took a look at an MSI AEGIS PC about 9 months ago, and while it was expensive, the performance and the design of that PC blew me away as an epic pre-built PC. You can find it linked in the description. Now I'm back taking a look at MSI's latest AEGIS, the Ti3. But boy, have there been some substantial changes since I took a look at the last AEGIS. The Ti3's specification in the model that I've been sent to review are as follows. An i7-7700K with custom MSI Dragon Edition Silent Storm water cooling, a custom Z270 chipset MSI motherboard, 64GB of DDR4 SODIMM 2400 MHz RAM, 2 M.2 512GB SSDs in RAID 0, a 3TB hard drive, an 850W Platinum PSU, and 2 MSI Gaming X GTX 1080s. There is also a GTX 1070 SLI version as well, and I wouldn't be surprised if sometime in the near future we see a GTX 1080 Ti SLI version as well. However, all of the AEGIS Ti3's rather epic specification does mean that it comes with an equally epic price tag. The cheapest that I could find this version, the GTX 1080 SLI version, was £4,099.95 via John Lewis here in the UK. Over on Amazon US, it was available at $4,699.99. So there's a rather substantial markup on the cost of the components with the AEGIS Ti3, which will certainly put off all but the most enthusiast of spenders looking for the ultimate 4K pre-built gaming rig. And yes, this is a fully pre-built system, and while there are accessible side panels for relatively easy upgrading of the RAM, SSDs, M.2 slots, adding in your own, even the GPUs, and potentially the CPU as long as you stick to the LGA 1151 socket. Not that I could see anyone really needing to upgrade from an i7-7700K, to be honest. This PC just isn't aimed at the build your own PC market. So let's move on and take a look at the front panel I/O options, which feature a USB 3.1 Gen 2 Type A port, a USB 3.1 Gen 1 Type A port with Supercharger 2 technology, a mic input and a headphone out, and also an HDMI out for the MSI VR Link. Turning over to the rear I/O, we have 2 USB 2.0 ports, 6 USB 3.1 Gen 1 Type A ports, an HDMI out, an HDMI in to connect your graphics card to the VR Link front port, all your various audio jacks on the rear. There's also 2 Wi-Fi antenna connectors, and the antennas are supplied with the PC as well. And then you have your killer Ethernet LAN port, and you also have a PS2 port. The custom AEGIS Ti3 case and general look and design of the PC as a whole is aimed for those that want, the best of the best without having to build it themselves. There's also an element of portability that I did mention in my previous AEGIS review, as the case features a solid carrying handle, and while I wouldn't want to lift the AEGIS Ti3 for too long, it's certainly transportable to a LAN party, a friend's house, taking it to university for the semester, or wherever else you might want to take a PC. I certainly like the case design, and I like the tweaks and changes that have occurred in the Ti3 version from the AEGIS that I took a look at 9 months ago. I think the case looks pretty cool, and actually, surprisingly, it does work well to cool the PC itself, as it uses a 3-chamber design. The dual GTX 1080s sit at the top of the case in their own dedicated chamber, drawing fresh air in from the vents on the left side panel. Below them is the chamber for the CPU, motherboard, RAM, etc. And below that, in the base of the angled case itself, is the Psu chamber. MSI believes that this 3-chamber design is more efficient than traditional PCs, which have just a single chamber, where obviously all your components are just within one section of the PC. And I would agree, a 3-chamber design is much better than a single one, in most PCs anyway. However, due to the smaller form factor of the AEGIS Ti3 and the fact that it's packed full of components and cables, which is hardly a bad thing, the 3-chamber design seems more a compulsory one to me in order to achieve reasonable temperatures, which you can now see up on screen. As the image shows, the CPU temperature topped out at 83 Celsius, with the two GTX 1080s reaching 78 Celsius and 83 Celsius respectively. However, it should be noted that these temperatures were pretty much the worst case scenario for the AEGIS Ti3, as these were recorded after hours of rigorous benchmarking of games and synthetic load tests, which often push a PC system further than normal use and kind of general gaming. As such, for a normal gaming session, when I re-recorded the temperatures, they reached around 75 Celsius on the CPU, and the two GTX 1080s sat around the middle 70 degrees mark. This was without any tweaking or setting of custom fan profiles to aid in cooling, so if you're happy to increase the AEGIS Ti3's noise levels a little bit, although I should mention in terms of noise, it certainly didn't detract from anything I was watching, listening, just general gaming experiences. It wasn't that loud at all, so I was pretty pleased. But if you don't mind increasing the noise levels a little bit, you can obviously set your own custom fan profiles for the GPUs and tweak and improve cooling further that way. However, I should say with the worst case scenario temperatures that you just saw, I didn't see any thermal throttling on any of the hardware, and it didn't seem to impact my benchmarks at all. It should also be mentioned that the benchmarks that I'm about to show you in a minute will run with the MSI Dragon button on the front panel of the case pressed in, enabled, which sets a predefined overclock to the CPU, taking it from a turbo speed of 4.5 GHz to 4.8. So let's take a look at some 4K benchmark results for a few games now on the AEGIS Ti3. So I only ran the benchmarks at 4K for the AEGIS Ti3, as to be perfectly honest, if you're buying this PC and running it at 1080p or 1440p resolutions, then you're doing it wrong. This PC is massive overkill for 1080p and 1440p resolutions. 4K is where you'll be wanting to run this system on, maybe even trying to push it higher than that, and the benchmarks for the 4 games tested all ran well over 60 FPS at 4K, with the exception of Dawn of War 3's 150% resolution scale, which, just dropped to 57. I should mention I didn't show DirectX 12 benchmark results for Total War Warhammer or Battlefield 1, as both yielded much lower FPS than they should do, and I feel drivers or general DirectX 12 implementation in those games were at fault rather than the AEGIS Ti3 itself, and I've come up against similar issues in the past when testing with DirectX 12. Anyway, let's move on and briefly talk about speed. The speed of the two M.2 SSDs that are configured in RAID 0, to be more specific, as they yield some of the fastest read and write speeds on the Crystal Disk Mark benchmark that I've ever seen. So up on screen right now you can see an image of that benchmark result. So nearly 2,800 sequential read speeds and nearly 2,000 sequential write speed with that test, which is blisteringly fast, especially when compared to a traditional SSD, which hits around 400 to 500 read speed and 3 to 400 write speed. These were insane speeds that this benchmark showed, as well as just my general gaming experience showed as well. This is in part obviously down to the M.2 hardware itself, but also to MSI for utilizing Super RAID 4 with the AEGIS Ti3. This will obviously result in faster loading of games, so for Total War, loading in and out of battles was nearly instantaneous. The loading bar went zipped straight along, loading save games very quick as well, obviously transferring files and just aiding in general workflow for editing files, for which for me is rather important personally, just working with Adobe Premiere Pro and things like that. Super fast. Plus, if that wasn't enough, there's also room on the motherboard itself for Intel's Optane technology too, should you be looking to utilize that. Also, I should mention, booting up your PC with the rather insane RAID 0 combination of these M.2 drives took 24 seconds from pressing the power button to being on the desktop ready to game and work. So yeah, it's bloody fast. Finally, let's talk features. Obviously, there's RGB, because RGB must be on and in everything right now. RGB is all controlled via MSI's Mystic Light settings in their MSI Command app. MSI have continued to also include their VR link, which I mentioned earlier when we took a look at the front and rear panel I/O, which is useful. It's an HDMI pass-through port from the rear of the case to the front panel, which just makes it easier to connect up your HTC Vive, your Oculus Rift, or whatever VR headset you have. There's also premium sound delivered to you by separate audio channels and enhanced by Audio Boost 4 technology and the Nahimic Audio Enhancer software. There's also killer Ethernet LAN and Wi-Fi support to offer gamers the lowest latency possible, as well as a whole host of MSI apps and software to enhance your gaming experience, or you can disable and not use should you wish to. Also, MSI have included 2 headphone hangers, as I guess that's what I'll call them, which pull out from the side of the case, kind of look like Optimus Prime antennas, sort of thing, which, yeah, I think they look pretty cool, but obviously they're useful, and you can place your headphones on them, so it's a nice touch. So there we have it, the AEGIS Ti3 from MSI. It's a 4K monster, as I've already said, a monster with arguably a monstrous price tag, but also insane performance in-game and crazy fast storage speed, read and write speeds. Ultimately, it's the combination of performance and MSI's AEGIS design that will draw in gamers for this high-spec beast, if you have the money to do so. For others, it will remain too expensive, and many will prefer a similar spec PC themselves from parts for a lot less. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this review. Feel free to leave a comment down in the comment section. Thanks again to MSI for sending this PC over to review. Now I've got to box it up and send it back. Anyway, until the next one, I hope you've enjoyed. Don't forget to comment, rate, and subscribe. Follow me on Facebook and Twitter. Take pride in the Legion. Check out my affiliates and sponsors, XMG, Greenman Gaming, Overclockers UK, and MSI. Until the next one, ciao for now.